Necromancer is one of the most iconic classes in Guild Wars 2, and without a doubt one of the most widely enjoyed ones to boot. In this video, I'm going to cover everything that you need to know to get started with the Undeath boy. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Guild Wars 2 and Guild Wars Reforged content. Possibly one of the best cursing classes in the game, the Necromancer does a phenomenal job at draining enemies with shadowy and death magic. Necromancers have somewhat of a unique playstyle between their profession mechanic and also some of their abilities that are able to inflict conditions on themselves and then transfer them over to enemies, or simply purging enemy buffs and turning them into negative effects. The Necromancer really encapsulates this perfectly well, and when you add in the fact that it's able to summon undead minions, it really fits the vibe. Let's get started talking about the profession mechanic. The profession mechanic for the Necromancer is the Death Shroud. This works both as an offensive and defensive ability at the same time. When using skills and abilities, Necromancer steal life force, which fills a bar above your weapon skills. When needed, the Necromancer can activate the Shroud to enter into a significantly strengthened state, allowing them to fear enemies and deal a lot more damage. This also doubles as a secondary health pool, as not only does the Shroud slowly tick down on life force on its own, any additional damage taken by enemies will make it end even sooner. The Shroud fits all playstyles, but it is one of the most iconic skills in this game, and it's a load of fun. Let's talk about the weapons. As a baseline, the Necromancer can use the Staff, the Axe main hand, the Dagger main hand, Scepter, as well as the Dagger, Focus, or Warhorn on the offhand. With either the Elite Specializations or the Weapon Master training related to the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, Necromancers can also use the Greatsword, Pistols main hand, or Torch offhand. Specifically, the expanded weapon proficiency, the Necromancer can then use the sword in both main hand and offhand, allowing for a ton of unique playstyles. Personally, the Greatsword is the most satisfying just because it looks great within Azura, but the Staff is probably one of its most useful effects for generating life force as well as controlling groups of enemies. And of course, with the Janthier Wild expansion, all classes gain access to use of the Spear, including the Necromancer. Let's talk about skills. The utility skills that the Necromancer can use are Corruption, Minions, Spectral, Wells, and Signets. As mentioned before, corruption skills affect both the enemy and the Necromancer with negative effects. However, uniquely, the Necromancer has the capability of transferring their conditions or turning those conditions into boons or additional health. Minions are honestly the best aspect of the core Necromancer, 100%, as a variety of them can be summoned to do the Necro's bidding. Not only do they do an attack on their own, but they each have a specific on-demand skill that changes depending on what the minion is. Honestly, Flesh Golem makes all of open world easy mode. It's so easy. The spectral skills are oriented around defensives, allowing for the Necromancer to become more slippery or armored, really, while generating life force for their Shroud. Well skills are placed on the ground, either harming enemies or helping allies over the course of the duration. And then, of course, Signet skills, much like all the other classes, both have passive and active effects. However, the passive effect goes on cooldown once the active effect is used. As a baseline, the Necromancer has a total of 5 core trait lines that enhance various skills and abilities for their use. Spite is heavily oriented around improving strike damage and either making the Necromancer stronger or the enemy more vulnerable. Curses are oriented around improving condition damage and inflicting more conditions over time. Death magic is defensive oriented by generating a buff called Carpus, which improves your toughness for a time, but this trait line also improves minions, which honestly, minions are so cool. They're so much fun. Blood magic is support oriented through healing and lifestealing and can also help revive downed allies. And lastly, Soul Reaping improves all of the Shroud profession mechanic as well as its life force generation. Let's go ahead and talk about the Elite Specializations. The Reaper is the first Elite Specialization introduced for the Necromancer and is by far the most popular Elite Specialization for the Necromancer, and maybe the most popular Elite Specialization in the game. The Reaper forgoes the standard Death Shroud for the Reaper Shroud, which operates the same as a secondary health bar, but it is heavily oriented around melee skills and abilities with strong AoE. The downside, however, is that it drains much faster. Most profound is the Executioner Scythe, which hits insanely hard on a target, dealing more damage based off of how much HP the target is missing. The lower it is, the heavier the hit. Reapers gain access to the Greatsword, which does heavy cleave damage and can pull enemies, as well as reducing the target's armor. Reapers also gain access to shout abilities that deal damage to nearby enemies, but also has secondary effects if the enemies are within melee range. Their trait lines look to improve the effects of chill in its application and overall effect, as well as certain aspects of the Reaper Shroud itself. Regardless of how you look at it, the Reaper is an absolute blast to play. 10 for 10 would recommend. The Scourge, introduced during the Path of Fire expansion, is incredibly unique as it forgoes the Death Shroud for having the capability of summoning sand shades and using their specific skills. These shades operate in a small area where they are summoned and tend to have more of a defensive orientation by providing barrier or converting conditions on allies into boons. There is the Desert Shroud ability, which gives the Scourge a barrier, but pulses conditions to enemies near your shades. The Scourge then gains access to the Torch as a weapon, which deals condition damage to enemies and can even crowd control them with a knockdown. Unique to the Scourge, they gain access to punishment skills, which each one of them converts enemy boons into the condition Torment, which deals more damage if the target is stationary. Most of these skills also provide a hefty barrier as well. The trait lines are focused on improving either the defensive boons and barriers with your shades, as well as increasing the amount of outgoing condition damage that you deal, while also applying burning. The Scourge has a lot of capabilities, and not only being strong condition style DPS, but also being able to support allies with a good amount of boon generation and barriers generated. I would say that it's very good at support. The Harbinger Elite Specialization was introduced during End of Dragons expansion and takes the normal shroud and spins it on its head. As most of the other shrouds offer some kind of secondary health pool or providing barrier, the Harbinger Shroud does nothing in the sense of defensive boons, and in fact, the longer that the Harbinger is inside its shroud, it applies blight to them, and that stacks up all the way to 25. For each stack of blight that the Harbinger has, it reduces their overall HP by 1%, up to a cap of 25. In turn, the Harbinger Shroud skills are incredibly powerful, and it deals more damage if you have blight stacks at higher levels, consuming some of those stacks. This shroud is incredibly fast and dangerous, living on a blade's edge almost. The Harbinger gains access to the pistol main hand, which is heavily focused on applying conditions at range. They gain access to elixir skills, which have a variety of effects, but has a unique use that when the Harbinger uses the elixir and is within the splash area of the elixir, they gain blight. If the enemy is in the splash area, the enemy is inflicted with condition, amongst other things. If you are at or above a certain blight threshold, you will consume some of that blight to deal twice as much damage and apply your conditions twice as long. The trait lines for the Harbinger are heavily focused on improving your outgoing damage, as well as improving the Harbinger Shroud overall. There also allows you to pulse the boon Quickness, which is a vital boon in all grouped content. The Harbinger is a very fast elite specialization, and honestly, if played right, it's a ton of fun. If not, it's like playing the Elementalist. Newest to the Necromancer, the Ritualist is a callback to the Guild Wars 1 faction campaign, and this elite specialization is tied to the Visions of Eternity expansion, the most recent one that came out, allowing for Necromancers to replace the Death Shroud with the Ritualist Shroud. The Ritualist Shroud provides the extra health bar, but also allows for spirits to be summoned. These spirits have a variety of effects, namely them having an immediate effect, a secondary effect that will continue as long as you are within the Ritualist Shroud, mainly attacking enemies. Once the shroud is over, however, the spirits will despawn, unless it is traded for. The Innervate skills affect your spirits, allowing for a number of different effects such as damage or crowd control. Management of the spirits are the key to success with the Ritualist. With all new Visions of Eternity Elite specializations, there are no new weapon skills. However, they do gain access to the unique set of skills called weapon spells. Man, honestly, Necromancers get all the cool stuff. These empower the Ritualist's next few attacks while granting a similar and weaker version of that skill to nearby allies. The trait lines, of course, are centered around improving the spirits in both offensive and supportive capabilities. And honestly, the Ritualist is one of the hotter new elite specs, and I will say it's quite popular. I don't know if it's quite as popular as the Reaper, however. Regardless of the flavor of the Necromancer you choose, this is by far one of the most fun classes that you can play in Guild Wars 2. So if you're about like death and shadow and cursing your enemies, this is the class for you. If you want to see the simplest new player guide for the most unique class in MMOs, then click this video here. Otherwise, stay caffeinated, folks.